our next session will be on one of the main bottlenecks for all sorts of ocean renewables, and that's Harbours. For that, I'd like to ask David Filiol, Kaspars, Liepiņš, Björn, Wittek, and Jerry Hallissey to join me on stage, please. Hello. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me. Now, David, you're first. You're the head of market research and governance at Belgium-based Euroports. Is your microphone working?
I don't know. Yes.
Yes. Please hold it very close to your lips.
Copy that.
To your mouth. Your company has been co-developing and is operating the French port of Port-la-Nouvelle and is involved in several other offshore wind terminals. Could you talk us through, please?
Yes, sure. Euroports is present in port operation through 52 ports around the world, and over the last 5 years we are developing offshore wind terminals. The flagship of Euroports is the French port of Port-la-Nouvelle, still under construction, but already under operation with the 3 pilot farms of EFGL and EolMed. This one will be ready by 26 for 42 hectares, mainly covering the Mediterranean basins. We see 3 key areas of developments: the Mediterranean, obviously, but also the Baltics and Bothnia. With that, we have secured also ongoing project under construction and development in Kaspars, in the south of Finland, for a 90 hectares full hub. But also recently in Latvia, the port of Liepiņš, we have secured 2 years of exclusive right with our consortium partners Smulders and Van Oort to develop a 55 hectares terminal. And more recently, but a very large and mature market, being the North Sea, where we are trying also to develop a new terminal.
Okay. Well, let me take you back to France. Port-la-Nouvelle is a one-stop hub. Do you think that model can be replicated everywhere else?
Well, I will be transparent with you. We came with the idea that the business case of Port-la-Nouvelle could be and would be easily duplicable. The reality is that there is a lack of port availabilities, old and old-fashioned infrastructure, and at the end of the day, few companies are able to put $500 million each year to build or extend or renew a new port. So rather than doing very large full hub, where we can do the prefabrication, the assembly, the integration for the floating, the staging, anchoring, mooring lines, and O&M, we are doing specialized hub. Smaller hub, dedicated to the assembly, the fabrication, independently of the distance from the farm. Then we are developing close to the farm hub dedicated to integration for the floating, with 17 hectares minimum, 30 tons bearing capacity, even better for the and upper for the heavy pad, etc. And then we are developing also smaller hub for the O&M. The idea is really to be able to have more agility, to be more reactive, to have project financing done more swiftly and easily with partners, and to address the project developers' requirement.
So that would be smaller hubs. Is it easy, though, to get the finance in place for that?
Not at all. It's quite difficult. This is why we are trying to find also new way of financing. Usually, we all company going to see founded providers. You do your nice financing roadshow. You try to leverage some equity from external companies, and then you have your project finance done. The reality is that bank and funds are more difficult to address currently, so we are creating new structure, SPV, with partners, like we have done with DEME and CARE in Port-la-Nouvelle, we are doing with Van Noord and Smulder in Latvia. And with this new type of project financing, we are able to have more flexibility and we are able to reply quickly and at the end of the day to de-risk the project. Because it's always the question of the chicken and the egg. The turbine manufacturer could take a long-term concession, but they need commitment from the developers. The developers need commitment from the CFD. The port authorities need commitment from the developers. So nobody as of today want to take a 15, 20 years concession, long-term concession on the offshore wind industry. And this is where we are playing, if I may say.
Do you think that with offshore wind energy really taking off in certain areas, floating offshore wind having lots of potential, that might be about to change?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, again, we are definitely believing in this industry. We are seeing currently CFD, FID moving forward, and FID it's a big milestone. So in the Baltics with RW recently, but also Ørsted, we are seeing new potential, and a lot of developers are requesting for already booking port reservation for projects that will happen in the next 3 up to 5 years. So yes, for me there is clear signal from the industry that it's moving on the right way.
All right, great. Thank you so much, David Filiol. Thank you. Jerry Hallissey, you're from across the channel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. A little bit further than across the channel. We're the west coast of Ireland.
Yeah, you're a bit further even. You're head of business development at Shannon Foynes Port Company, a port, as you said, on the west coast of Ireland. Ireland so far has not that many offshore wind turbines up and running, just a few. But I understand that could change very soon and very fast.
Absolutely. I suppose to date we were led the world in many respects with the first 7 turbines that were deployed in the Irish Sea back at the turn of the decade, or the turn of the millennium actually. Since then there's been very little traction. The Irish government have an ambition of 7 gigawatts of offshore development by 2030 to include 2 gigawatts of hydrogen production. The ambition that's there at the moment is escalating at a rapid pace. The ports are preparing plans to facilitate that development as we move forward. I suppose we're just from my own perspective, we're Ireland's largest and deepest port with 500 square kilometres, 32 metres of water depth, 1,250 acres or hectares of zoned land. So my message, I suppose, at any of these events that I attend is that we haven't got the experience in Ireland. We need the assistance of the industry in general to help us to deliver the solutions. We have ambition from the Shannon Foynes Port Authority point of view. We're putting together plans for an 800-metre quayside with 18.5 metres of water alongside. And 40 hectares of quayside storage to facilitate floating in the primary instance to be built by about 2030, give or take. We're in the planning process for that at the moment, and again we're developing that facility in conjunction with creating the Shannon Estuary Energy Hub. It always was an energy hub in times past between hydroelectricity and power generation from carbon fuels, but we're transitioning into new fuel generation and even e-fuel. We recently signed an MOU with the Port of Rotterdam for the delivery of green fuels to mainland ports in Europe in a post-2030 scenario. And again, we've got a lot of work to do to deliver that sort of resource and that size of resource. Our own ambition in the immediate vicinity is 30 gigawatts by 2050 out of a resource that's there in excess of 100 gigawatts immediately adjacent to our port on the west coast of Ireland.
As you just said, cooperation will be crucial for you. Cooperation with European ports, but also Irish ports, I suppose?
Absolutely, and as a representative here from the Port of Rosslare, and we do cooperate quite well together. This is about building a resource and building a solution. We can't do it ourselves in Ireland ports on our own. We need the assistance of the industry, the established industry, and the industry in transition to help us to deliver the solutions. From the port's point of view, those ports here on mainland Europe, and especially in France, that are going to work to deliver floating projects are of particular significance, because I think that if we can work together to deliver these solutions, then we bring forward the timeline for delivery on many of these projects. And I do agree with the points earlier. The floating landscape is likely to be a game changer. I think the early part of the next decade should lead to a lot of delivery of those resources.
And also exporting electricity will be crucial for you, right? Because Ireland doesn't need all that extra capacity.
Absolutely. Again, the difficulty with that is the constraints of grid that we currently have in Ireland. So while we have an additional capability to take a domestic supply from the energy production, the route to market to de-risk it from a developmental point of view is the primary object of what I try to do. So the potential for green hydrogen production, green ammonia, green methanol, and sustainable aviation fuel, Ireland will not need the power that's in the Atlantic for its own requirements. So the potential is there to ship vast quantities over time into a European requirement there, adding to Europe's energy independence.
And to what extent are you cooperating with players abroad in other countries when it comes to these areas, these ways of exporting electricity?
As I said, it's all pretty much collaboration with the European industries. The MOU with the Port of Rotterdam is a significant one, because it displays the ambition of not only our ambition to export, but the offtake requirement into Germany, into the Netherlands, into Belgium, and into France even. And we've had conversations, or a lot of conversations with Europa here, a lot of conversations with the ports here adjacent to where we are, Nantes and Nazaire, Brest, etc. And it's all about providing solutions. This is how when we work together, we deliver solutions.
Okay, thank you very much, Jerry. And you're here for the 2 days as well, so if anybody wants to talk about cooperation, you're around, right?
Here till Friday evening.
Let's look a bit further east with you, Kaspars Liepiņš. You're from, hello.
Yes, indeed, I'm from Latvia.
Yeah, you're from Latvia, exactly. You're a green energy cluster developer at Freeport of Ventspils Authority.
That's correct, yes. And we are, as a port authority, we are promptly and decisively joining the race for the offshore wind port development. We have done quite an extensive study last year together with Wittek and Boss, Dutch port engineering consulting. So we know the location, we know the estimates, we know the costs, and now we are actively joining the race to develop the offshore wind port, competing maybe with a project in Liepiņš, because it's getting a bit crowded there. You know, you have Lithuanians next, Polish next, so we are a little bit in open waters. So as an ice-free port, deep water port, we believe we have a very good potential. And after all, you know, you have only 2 years of the exploration, and afterwards we might talk again.
Well, you told me beforehand that your port is within a radius of 200 kilometers of possibly 13 offshore wind farms in the future, right? That could spring up in the future. To what extent, what are you doing in order to gear up to be able to accommodate these activities?
Yes, so currently, as you probably know, you know, and it was also seen from the previous discussion, there is not much ongoing as we speak in the Eastern Baltic waters. But we see that this snowball is coming, that you will have a flurry of activities, and there'll be a lot of offshore wind developments taking place. So the port is making itself ready. It's actively talking with investors. It's actively talking with large players on potential collaboration. We are public authority, so state has to take its own investment as well, and that's what we are doing currently now. We are exploring what is our niche, whether it's universal port, marshalling, O&M, manufacturing, or whether we'll take some specialty part like underwater or above the water structures. That depends to be explored, and we are very actively, I would say, and aggressively working towards it.
So what kind of operations could be run from Ventspils?
Well, we believe, as we can see also from the French port perspective, we can be universal port, especially taking that those potential wind farm development sites might need a full array of activities starting from foundation, ending up with the towers, nacelles, and all the other assembly. And cables as well. Well, I think we can also be quite well positioned serving the power part of this industry.
And we heard from Jerry a bit earlier on, you were talking about green hydrogen. That's also something that you're looking at other energies, right?
Yes, that is another vector, another perspective. We historically, Port of Ventspils was by far one of the largest energy exporter in the, let's say, former Soviet Union when we were occupied by Russia. So we had like 50 million tons of the petroleum product and refined petroleum products and crude oil exported every year through our port. So based on that knowledge, how to handle the dangerous goods, gases, liquids, we are betting that we can also do quite well in terms of renewable fuels, alternative fuels. So we cover currently, well, I would say 4 to 5 projects ongoing for the hydrogen, green hydrogen production, biomethanol, e-methanol, green ammonia, and also SAF. So there's quite a flurry of interest and activities, and developers are actively pursuing that one.
So lots of leeway for cooperation between you and Jerry, for example.
Yeah, we can supply, out of the Baltics, also the Western Europe and the demand centers. That is what we are betting. So we're betting that we will have excessive, and by many studies, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania will have this excess of the energy. We are able to convert it into renewable fuels. One more thing to remember, we are also strong in the biofuel side. We have a lot of biomass, which is even better for those methanol type fuels. So yeah, we see a good perspective.
Great. Thank you so much, Kaspars Liepiņš. Björn Wittek, hello.
Hello.
So we've heard about how ports need to expand, how much more space there is needed. Sorry, just some paper issues here. You are the general manager at Germany's Rhenus Offshore Logistics. In a nutshell, which ports are you operating in right now? What kind of activities do you have?
We as Rhenus Logistics Group operate about 70 terminals, inland and seaport terminals in continental Europe, strong focus Germany, Netherlands, rivers along the Rhine. And in this function, we have been exposed to offshore wind since about 15 years, and the offshore industry as a whole since about a century. Might be a bit astonishing, but in one of our ports in Nordenham, we have Prysmian, former times Norddeutsche Seekabelwerke, marine cable manufacturer located with its plant since about 100 years, and they are direct neighbors to us. And we have been working on old-style cable-laying vessel when DP1 or DP nothing, dynamic positioning, wasn't even known what that is. It was a cable operating and deploying cables across the Atlantic. So offshore is nothing new for us. What is quite clearly new is how the offshore wind industry has evolved and developed. And being so long in the industry and having so many seaport terminals certainly has given us a good exposure of what the industry needs. And the discussion at the moment focuses very much on just installation, more space to ship turbines and monopiles out to the industry. But I think that's only half of the truth. At least that's what we are seeing in our operations. For Cooksport, a terminal at the River Elbe, it's clear it's an installation port. We see more and more maintenance vessels coming in at the same time. Nordenham has a very different function at the River Weser. We have 2 manufacturers over there. One is manufacturing monopiles. That means we have to deliver in steel plates. We have to ship out the finished cargo. We have space demands behind this factory. Cable plant is still there, so it means a lot of cargo going in and later on going out. And in Rotterdam, one of our terminals at the Maasvlakte is the demobilization base for Seaway, one of the large T&I contractors in the offshore world. If they have no base where they can store the equipment they need for the installation campaigns, we have a big problem, because they need to mobilize, demobilize in between the next projects. So I think looking at offshore wind means we have to take a look on all aspects of who is actually requiring space in a port, and it's not just the installation side, it's O&M, it's manufacturing, it's even the contractor side.
So what kind of specific solutions have you come up with to deal with that limited amount of space?
First thing, make land more expensive and tempt clients to put things closer together and open up additional space. That's something they don't like to hear, but at least it's a working instrument in ports where you're limited in terms of space. But joke aside, there are not so many options available. In many places we are operating in, there is no land available, which can be made available for port development. If you take a look at Rotterdam, existing mass flooded terminal, we are surrounded by industry and surrounded by water. You have to live with what is available. Same in many other locations. Cuxhaven is now getting new terminals. A tender process is going on, but there are not many locations where you can actually construct new harbors. We have to figure out what are options. There's certainly the idea, store monopiles, not on land, store them on barges. Locate the barges wherever you have port space available. Not every quayside is needed at each and every time, and float the barge over to the installation vessel when needed. That opens up several thousand square meters of space, and you are able to distribute wherever you want to. Port space at the moment is competing not only offshore, but we are competing with onshore wind as well. There's so much import of rotor-based tower sections to fulfill the onshore requirement that one of the questions is, what can we move out in terms of cargo into the hinterland? Do we have to touch blades coming in for onshore, even offshore, truck them, let's say 1.5, 2, 3 kilometers into the hinterland, load them into a green field? All possible. One catch is, whatever solution we are going to tackle, it's going to cost extra. And I think that's one of the messages developers have to understand. The most expensive piece you have in a port is the quayside. And land behind it is always expensive, but if we want to use the most expensive part in the best possible way, the quayside, we have to ensure that as much land behind it is available, and that only works in the way of shifting cargo from the immediate vicinity of the quayside somewhere into the hinterland.
Do you feel that developers are hearing that message and suppliers?
They have probably started to hear that one. If they have started to realize it, is probably a second set of questions. But I think with the number of tenders we are seeing at the moment, and the size of tenders, and the competition for the same space in certain ports, we will have to come up with creative solutions. And the idea of throwing several tens of hectares or like square kilometers of additional sport space into the arena, especially in the North Sea, is unrealistic from my point of view. There's not so much space which can be redeveloped. There's not a lot of greenfield area available which can be utilized on short notice. We have more or less to live with what is available and try to find spots where we can realize fast and quick solutions. Starting a port planning process now and realizing a terminal from scratch, 8 to 10 years minimum. But looking at the installation curves, that's easy. Wish curves, we have no 10 years. We have to live with something which is available in 5 to 7 years latest.
Well, time is also of the essence in another way, right? When you look at developers.
Yes, to answer that quite easy. It's always a question, the targets set by the political environment, let's say 30 gigawatt in Germany. Do we understand them as hard targets which need to be reached on the 31st of December in 2030? Or do we see them as a guideline and have the understanding, as long as we are on a proper approach to that one and have the targets or the projects being committed, it doesn't really matter if they're completed a half year later or a year later, as long as we are on the correct path. And looking on the peak, which at least shows in the intended installation and what additional infrastructure we need to throw into the market, I'm not sure that this peak is really the best idea we have in utilizing these resources. We have to ask ourselves, what is happening after the peak? Is the space then, or is there a proper utilization for the space available afterwards? Or are we all of a sudden stuck with a lot of empty area and start to compete on price and win nothing?
But do developers also understand that they need maybe to be more efficient or less savvy when it comes to, the reservation time for certain space, so they can divvy up the capacity between them?
That's certainly part of it as well. The port operation or the port world, we like to talk about dynamic capacity. It's in principle the factor how much tonnage or how much cargo can we shift over a certain meter of key length, certain square meter. For the big projects, installation projects, we typically have the large project developers or T&I contractors, who is ever in charge, book a lot of terminal space for a certain period of time with risk margins in, but it means we are blocking a lot of space. One of the questions is an installation vessel will come into port maybe twice a week, but it means that 5 times a week the quayside is available. Do we need to make sure that everybody has its exclusive quayside available at all times? Or do we go over to a shared model, as we are used in the container terminals or in common user container terminals as well? The quayside is available for 2 or 3 projects, and we have to find a clever way of managing, bringing the cargo towards the quayside and ensure that everybody can load. But if it means waiting time for somebody, it's expensive, but it may still be cheaper than everybody booking its own exclusive quayside and project side. But it means you have to assume and calculate a different risk than what is currently done in project management.
Thank you very much, Björn, Wittek. Would you like to comment on that? Do you agree with that, Kaspars, Jerry, David?
Yes, well, I can agree with that in terms of, let's say, land availability. We I think in the port in the Baltic region are generally in a better position. We don't have so much of the industrial clusters around it. They are appearing, they are developing, but currently, as mentioned, Port of Ventspils are looking to have around 40 to 50 hectares of the land reclaimed from the sea, and then another 100 hectares in hinterland directly connected to this terminal, so which gives you 150 hectares of quite nice space. So yes, there is a bottleneck. We can see it clearly by being part of this offshore wind events, in Europe and talking with the other ports. But in our case, we see that that's not a bottleneck for us, at least. Bottleneck is a political uncertainty about the offshore wind project development timelines, and that's what we see from our side.
Okay. What about you?
It's quite obvious from this conversation that most people haven't been talking to me. So we've got a considerable land availability, greenfield sites, deep water, 1,250 hectares zoned currently for port-related activity and energy infrastructure, and an intention to zone more land for that purpose. I tend to agree, though, overall with the conversation. There is a rush to try and put installations in ports that are overly congested because of other trade lanes. We're fortunate, I suppose, in some regards, we're Ireland's largest bulk and break bulk port, so we're not overly congested, but we've got a huge throughput of cargo, and we've got a land availability that's there that can facilitate these developments moving forward. Again, I emphasize the position, we're in an infancy situation, so there's no heritage there in this regard, and it's about reaching out to those that can help us to deliver those solutions. But we've got what people are looking for, and it's just to get that known to people, and I think we can do a lot of work together.
Great. David, any comment?
Yeah, I'm fully agree on the bottleneck. There are actually 3 bottlenecks: the port capacity, the ringer crane availability, and the vessel supply. If we are talking about port, just keep this simple number in mind. 1 gigawatt represents 3 years of the full site occupation. If you are in front of 20 gigawatts, you do the math. It's pretty simple.
Okay, so much more capacity and new solutions needed in the future.
No ports, no project.
Right.
And there's no capacity issues there. I mean, the capacity is there where the constraint is there, but moving forward, there's no competition between ports, because it'll be ports will be built specifically for the offshore resource as it's needed to be deployed.
Right, so you're all a big family, big happy family. Thank you so much for taking part. Thank you for listening. And so this is the last panel for this day on this stage here. There's something else coming up, though. Thank you very much.
Yeah.